I think we view it as a struggle to figure it all out. And if somebody could relieve us of that, then we're more than happy to do it. I mean, even if they didn't know about the 34%, you tend to visualize that this is just something off my plate.
Hello, I'm Kyle Reese.
And I'm Raymond Ward. Um, Thank you for being here and spending your time with us. Kyle, today we were going to talk about what is considered the problem in the book. And a question I have for you is, prior to coming to IBC, did you have a sense that you were on a hamster wheel or a treadmill or something like that when it came to financing?
No,
Is that
not at all. I really didn't, and it was interesting because I had a unique blessing growing up in learning how to budget, learning a decent way of thinking about money. I find out now that it's wrong, but it was a conservative mentality towards finance. Save more than
mm,
you spend, and be responsible. And so for me, I felt like we were making financial decisions that were getting
yep.
us ahead.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't until I learned about infinite banking afterwards that I really understood what was going on with the hamster wheel. I was also young. I didn't have a lot of, I avoided expensive stuff. I bought everything used. My wife hated it. She wished I would spend more money, but I didn't. And that was just my mindset, my mentality, the way I was raised, all that kind of stuff. So in those years, I avoided some of the hamster wheel stuff, which was really helpful.
Yeah. So with that, would you elaborate on what you were obviously grew up in a house with fiscal intentions, but you said something about it. You found out later that it was wrong. What was that? What was that right there?
It was
That
scarce. Everything
what
was
was
scarce.
Oh,
It was scarcity
scarcity. My
mindset. Yeah, everything was scarce. Even though I had an abundance of resources, it was all viewed through a scarcity mindset. Put it, save. I think I had, okay, not a business person, just a standard W-2 guy. I think I had 9 bank accounts, and I put all my money, like the money I was saving for my bride's ring when I would eventually meet
Oh,
her, the money I was saving for a car, the money I was setting aside for car maintenance, the money I was saving for the house, and all of these were in different bank accounts. And so I took all of my resources and I just spread them out, shotgun, and they all, like, it was helpful in helping me not spend those things, but I had a very scarcity mindset to what I could achieve with the resources I had because I was so planning on saving for specific things in the future. I was locked into my own box, so to speak. So that's where the thinking was wrong. It was very scarcity mindset oriented.
yeah. And what do you think the overall mindset of the average person out there in the world, in the financial world? Do
Hands
you
down
think that it
scarcity.
scarcity?
Hands down.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think
So, yeah, go
mostly
ahead.
because I've been there and now I have a much more abundant mindset um, than I used to, and so I can recognize both for what they are. Even people like, I wouldn't have said that I had a scarcity mindset, not at all, um, but I can see it a little bit more clearly than I used to be able to, and I would say yes, very much so. A scarcity mindset prevails.
Yeah, and so what happens when you go from that scarcity mindset to prosperity mindset?
What happens? That's a
What
great
happens
question.
what happens in your mind and in your life, and what do you see around you? Like, how do you view the world?
I w- a
Yeah, take your
question that
time.
I asked.
Take-
No, it's these are great questions, Ray. Thank you. A question that I asked one of my clients was they were struggling with a lot of stuff, and I just asked them, does life present more obstacles or more opportunities? Life presents the same amount of stuff. It doesn't matter, right? This is a classic half full, half empty conversation. It doesn't
mm,
matter, right? If you view it as an obstacle, your life is going to be frustrating. But when you have an abundant mindset, when you have a prosperity mindset, you're able to see what is as an opportunity to grow and embrace the fact that it's probably going to suck. And without the suck, it's not going to get better. And I think that's just that mindset shift of viewing things as purposeful, as helpful. I believe that our Creator has put challenges in front of us and constantly puts obstacles in front of us to help refine us to be more like Him. And without those refining experiences, we will never we will never become more like Jesus, and that's the goal, right? Is to reflect Him better. What I think is really cool is when you move from that scarcity mindset to that prosperity or the abundance mindset, you start to recognize the refining as refining, and you can see the good in it rather than just being frustrated by it. So
mm,
overall, just more peace.
yeah, yeah. So I've heard the phrase um, something like to the effect that life doesn't happen to you; it happens for you.
Hmm.
That when you change, I believe that when your mindset goes from scarcity to prosperity or abundance, you see the world differently. You see more abundance because you're setting your mind up that way, and so it goes out and sees that in the world and seeing opportunities. So if you've uh, got a pool of capital, those opportunities show up because you have this mindset that's more expansive of possibilities and infinite possibilities. But yeah, well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Thank you for asking. And I guess I'll repeat that question back to you as far as the hamster wheel goes. Did you feel like before infinite banking, did you feel like you were kind of in a hamster wheel for yourself?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I did. I think back to um, being living in when we lived in New Hampshire, and I had started and built a landscape business, um, and man, we were cranking out a lot of work, really nice work, and I just felt like, man, the cost of doing everything. I mean, there was a lot of money flowing through my fingers, and it just felt like was chasing it all the time, to the point where literally, I believe it burnt me out.
Mm,
And well, I kept reinvesting into the business, so uh, if anybody that's listening has had any experience in and around that, commercial lawnmowers and all that, pipe pullers, that stuff is not cheap. And I just kept plowing the money in and kept thinking, okay, we're going to get there, we're going to get there, and it just didn't seem that way. But um, it's a concerted effort, I will say too, that everybody has to be on the same page uh, about it. But yeah, I felt like I was on a bit of a hamster wheel. And when we moved here to Iowa, for whatever reason, we became more aware of our spending. I guess maybe that also correlates, is saying that I'm inferring that maybe we weren't when we were in New Hampshire because the
mm,
money was flowing, you know, and it was flowing. It was coming in and it was going out. I mean, we basically did whatever we wanted, to a limit, obviously. But yeah, it felt like we were on a bit of a hamster wheel. I don't feel that way any longer. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, and my mindset has shifted. I don't know that I felt like it was scarcity, but back in New Hampshire, but I felt like I was on a hamster wheel, that I was constantly feeling like I had to do something to keep the cash flow coming, because it was going right out the door almost as fast as it was coming in. Yeah.
And you hate those
So,
months when it goes out the door faster than it comes in.
oh yeah, and it could, yeah. So, yeah, I feel a lot more in the place of abundance.
Good.
Um, yeah. So,
That's awesome. Well, Nelson talks about the problem here in this section, and I think he narrows it down to two problems. One is the volume of interest, and the other one is that the all the items in our life are financed by other banking systems. So the two problems would be we focus on the rate of interest versus the volume of interest, and volume is killing us. And the second problem is that the reason why that's happening is because we don't own the banking function. We're paying other people to perform that function. And
yeah.
he starts off by saying, he said, I don't want people to think that you have to be rich to create a banking system that can handle all your needs for finance. That really spoke to me when I was first learning about this, and I know it spoke to quite a few people that are now clients of mine, because we're not all in a good spot. You mentioned the hamster wheel. Maybe we've been doing the hamster wheel for 6 months. Maybe we've been doing it for 20 years. Maybe we have a lot of money. Maybe we don't have a lot of money. Maybe money's going out just as fast as it's coming in, or there's all different sorts of circumstances.
Mm,
Even if your cash flow is high, maybe your expenses are really high. And so, how do we get ahead? How do we even take this function and start applying it in our lives and own this banking function? And I love the fact that you do not have to be rich. You do not have to have a bunch of money set aside to start something like this. All it takes
right.
is understanding it and beginning to implement it. You plant a seed and it becomes a tree. You don't go plant a tree, right? You
Right.
got to start somewhere.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
love that. That's hope.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hope. Yeah. And I think that's a good point that you make. Doesn't matter where you are. You could be uh, a $50,000 guy, or you could be a $5 million person. It's the same concept that moves you in a direction where you take back the banking function. And if you can do that, um, and your premium payments are going into a policy and it's compounding uninterrupted, that's extremely powerful. Um, yeah. So wherever you are, you should be thinking about starting it, or at least coming to understand how this really works.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What was it? So it's the volume of interest.
Yeah.
You're you're
Hmm.
you're at 5% for your car. You're at 3% for your house. You're at whatever. Maybe there's a credit card in there. The other thing is that I want to point out too is that people will come to us and say, I just pay cash,
Hmm.
not thinking that that is also paying interest, because you are giving that up for future interest that it could have accumulated. So, yeah, when I went up to that, we mentioned this in the previous episode, where I had gone to that farmer show, and a farmer came in and said, I just pay cash for everything.
Hmm.
And I was like, and just quickly in my head, I just think about, just think of all the interest that is being lost in that way. So, yeah, yeah. I thought that was another point that he was making, was that the interest that you give away, opportunity cost.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's huge, and it's probably the biggest cost, just because it's unseen. And
Mm.
when we can quantify a cost, we can put it in its correct category. But when we're not able to quantify a cost, the opportunity cost, for example, we cannot categorize that. We cannot say what it would have been. That's the problem with it, right? And that's what makes it so devastating. And again, why paying cash is not ideal.
Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like how
That's a really good point, Kyle.
well, thank you.
That
Yeah, I
you
like
can't see it. You don't know. You don't have any idea what
and
that could have done.
that's exactly what the infinite banking concept speaks to is there's so much more that's unseen in our futures. Of opportunities, of challenges, of all these other kinds of things. We don't know what that's all going to be. So plan to put yourself into a position to capitalize when the time is right and to create a barrier or a hedge against some of those challenges when the time is
Mm-hmm.
wrong, right? And that's what infinite
Mm-hmm.
banking provides. It's not just that house savings account. It's not just that ring savings account, for my future wife. It's not all these different little things that I think I'm going to do because that's what Americans do. That is my dream, so I'm going to achieve it. No, infinite banking, rather, it takes all that away and says, the future is unknown, so I'm going to be as well prepared for whatever that future might be as I possibly can. And in the meantime, all my stuff is going to grow on a guaranteed basis. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Really awesome. Yeah. And Nelson throughout the book talks about thinking about your thinking.
Hmm.
And just this morning, I'm reading a book, all the time. So I'm reading, and the subject, it's written by a psychologist, and he's talking about pride. And we have pride and what we're doing and all this. And it can block us from having an open mind. And he categorizes an open mind as a mind that can let that pride go to open up so new information could come in. And he talks about going deeper into the understanding of something. And so much of what we're talking about, people already think that they understand what it is, and that's not the case. So,
Isn't it too
um,
bad? We're so dang arrogant.
yeah,
So dang arrogant.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And this guy was talking about the deeper we go in, the more is revealed to us. And if you don't give yourself that chance, you're you could miss something that could have helped you. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the volume. I thought that was a great analogy about when you go to the doctor and you get a shot, and he
Yeah.
says it is about you don't want too much and you don't want too little. Too little doesn't fix the problem, and too much could kill you. Um, so it is the volume of interest that uh, is what is eating up. Well, according to Nelson, is 34.5% or something like that over the course of someone's life. I mean, you could play with those numbers, but
Yeah.
you get the
No,
idea. You
yeah,
get the idea.
absolutely. You know what's funny is I actually was sitting with a client recently and calculated all of their interest and all of the interest that was going out to other banks, and it was exactly 34.5%.
Oh wow!
I was like, ha, Nelson, you're right again. What the heck?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. Well, he had taken the time to really look at it. Uh,
he that man was a
he was a
researcher.
he was a researcher. He was a critical thinker.
Hmm.
You know, to give yourself the space to um, think it through. Not by what somebody else tells you, but use the tools to get to the answer yourself, and then you can own the information, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just great, and he talked about the real estate. the average American, moves every 5 years. So every time they're uh, going through the closing costs and all of that and paying off the old loan and getting a new loan, the interest and cost of doing that is astronomical.
It
And
is astronomical.
it's just unfathomable when you really think about it. So it makes me think, okay, the house we live in, we're getting really close to paying it off. And once it's paid off, we're staying right here.
Yeah.
unless an opportunity comes along and our pool of capital is large enough to make an investment or yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway.
it's crazy. I was sitting down with a couple who became clients last night, and we were talking. Just before I was sitting down with them, they were meeting with a mortgage loan officer, and they came in to that meeting not feeling super excited. And I was like, "What's going on?" And they said, "Well, we just sat down with our mortgage loan officer. You know, it's 7.25%. They're going to be first-time home buyers, and they're like, I just don't know. Is that buying a property or a home or anything is really in the cards for us right now? And they've got extra cash flow, and but when they realized all of the stipulations that the bank puts on, uh, it was just really disheartening for them, realizing how like ugly the banking world is. And so from that experience last night, and again going back through all this stuff, and how he calculated the volume of interest that goes um, towards the banks in the mortgage industry, I was like, you know what? I'm
Right.
just going to calculate, because they were frustrated saying it's 7.25%. Can you believe that? Like, it's so stinking high. And I was like, well, it was 9% and it's been 23%. So in that situation, 7% ain't that bad, right? But they're like, yeah, but
Yep.
it was
Yep.
2%. And I said, yeah, but is 2% sustainable? You know, so then you have all these, as an economy, is that a good, banking, is that a wise percentage to be at? I don't know. I ran some calculations this morning, and I was like, okay, the average American moves every 8 years. Nelson said 5 years, totally fine. Maybe 8 years is wrong, but let's just go with 8 years. If you move every 8 years and the interest rate is 3%, by volume, you pay 54% of all of your payments go toward interest. If the interest rate is 3%, you're paying 54% to interest by volume. That's crazy. If it jumps
Mm.
up to 5%, then you're going to be paying 73% by volume.
Yep.
And at a 7% interest rate, in 8 years, 84% of all your payments that you've paid to the bank are interest, lining the pockets of the banks.
Right.
That's horrible. But
Yeah.
so is 54%. Like, even when we're low, even we're in a really low interest rate environment, still 40, 50, 67% of your payments are going to someone else's bank because they own and control it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. You've
terrible.
given that up. And I would say that probably the house, a home is probably the highest volume that you
Mm.
run into. Potentially, maybe there's others. But when you think about the average person going for a home loan, um, yeah, it's astronomical what it really is. It's, yeah, as you've just pointed out, it's way more than 7%. Um, I don't know if this is really correct, but I think of, you don't get to that 7% until you're at the very, very end
Right.
of that cycle, at that amortization table. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not like a full expert on the way that banks rob people, but my understanding is they go backwards on that. They start at the 7% at 30 years, and then go backwards for 30 years to the present day.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of how
Yep.
they calculate it. That's why 15-year mortgages are so much cheaper, is because you're dealing with less a smaller term, right? A smaller amount of time, and follow that logic into how vehicles, right? If you're a 6% APR or whatever on a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
but it's only a 6-year loan or a 5-year loan, then your volume of interest is just a lot lower because it can't amortize for so many years as a 30-year mortgage would. But Nelson points that out, that even with vehicles, your volume is 20% when the rate is 8.5%. That's insane.
Right. Yeah. 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 And he also points out that most people are leasing,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is the most expensive way that you can finance a vehicle. So, yeah. Yeah. Taking, keeping the control of the banking function is that's why we're here, right? That you,
It's profitable.
it's profitable. It's much more advantageous to you and your family, or your small business. So
Yeah. And so people ask why. Why do we even get into banking, the banking function? Why do we take that control back over? And I think that is clarified further along in the book when he talks about the golden rule. And it's he who has the gold makes the rules. The banks have the capital, they're going to lend it to you, and you, if you accept that capital, you play by their rules. It's the way everything
right,
works.
right,
If you don't want to play by their rules, if you want a lower volume of interest, then why don't you take control over that banking function? It's not going to
yeah,
happen overnight, but you get yourself into that position where you're no longer having to go other people's routes. You don't have to play other people's games as much.
yeah, yeah. If you take it back, take the function back, you are in control. You make the rules. Um, yeah, and as we've talked about before too, when if you had started something 10 years ago, a contract policy contract, you might have enough in there to buy the house outright yourself
Yeah.
and make those payments to yourself, um, and in control. So there's no taking of the home, so to speak, uh, which is a huge um, dark cloud hanging over you for the time that you own that property or you're paying that payment to the bank. It's like a dark cloud over you. You just, if you miss, like right now, if we're just say we're at 30,000 for our home, we got 30,000 in mortgage, and all of a sudden we couldn't make payments and couldn't borrow it from anybody or anything like that, they would take the house.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem right, but that's what would happen. We may end up with something out of it, but the fact is they would say, well, we need to sell the house because that's what we collateralized. So, yeah. Anyway,
That's crazy.
um,
So,
yeah, I'm glad to feel like I'm off the hamster wheel.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Nelson talks about the problem being the volume of interest, and when you calculate by volume, it doesn't matter what the rates are, but by volume, 34.5% of your income is being spent on interest. Is going to line the pockets of the banks, and that's the average all American individual.
Mm,
But we are
yep,
told to focus on that 10%, right? How much are you saving? Are you saving 10%? Most people, 5%, 3%. It's very little here in America. Um, but let's just assume 10%, like Nelson did.
yep,
Focus on growing that 10%. And then don't even worry about all the 34.5%. Just forget about that. Just focus on the 10%. Well, you're in a really bad environment when you do it that way. It's crazy. It,
yeah,
you've got
yeah,
such a big headwind, and that's what he talks about being an airline pilot quite a bit. It's kind of the next session or next section.
yeah. Right, right. Yeah, we'll get into that the next section. Yeah, the environment that you're in, that you've put yourself in, with all the different loans that you've handed over to the banking function, um, yeah, creates a headwind for your savings. So you're doing all these other things, with these loans, but you're only saving. 5% or not at all. I recently talked to somebody that works at a financial research center, and she said that the young folks coming in aren't really even saving at this point. They don't see the point. So I'm sure that's not everybody, but anyway, yeah. So Kyle, what else can we say about this?
Well, he talks about the airline pilot, I mean, about the airplane, and how if you're fighting that headwind, if you're flying 100 miles an hour, um, if your wind speed or your airspeed is 100 miles an hour, but you've got a 345 mile an hour headwind, then you're going backwards 245
Right.
miles an hour, right? That's not
Yep.
helpful for anybody. But that's what's happening for a lot of people. That's his uh, his visualization of a hamster wheel, if you will. You just putting a lot of effort into going nowhere. But
Right.
everyone's
Yep.
doing that. So it's very difficult to recognize really what's happening because it was just a bunch of people doing that same exact thing. We're all fighting this big headwind. And he says, if you're trying to get from wherever he said, Alabama to Chicago, if you're going north, and and that's your environment, the smartest thing to do is to get on the ground as quick as you can, because you're actually going backwards. And
Right.
I was thinking
Yep.
about it, and it's like, if I was an airline pilot and that's what I did, was I go straight to the ground when that wasn't the plan. The plan was to fly until I get to Chicago. No matter what is going on, fly till you get to Chicago. It could look like giving up to land that plane.
Yes. Yep.
It's
Yep. Yeah.
important to recognize that it's not. It's That's wisdom. Land that plane, figure out what's going on, wait for the air mass to get over, and either go in a neutral environment, or even better, wait for the head or for the tailwinds
The
to come around
tailwind.
and propel you there. Right? You're going to be in a way better spot just by landing the plane, taking a second. I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Give yourself the space to imagine. Give yourself the break and the rest so that you can think clearly, and then go back up and fly the rest of the way.
Yeah. So uh, he makes the analogy of the young man with an auto loan. He has $10,500 loan, and that if he instead of taking the loan with the bank were to wait, so this is the landing of the plane, to wait for 4 years and save that inside of a policy, he could then go and pay cash for it. And when you have, this is part of the unseen, when you have cash and you're talking to an auto dealership, do you think the chances of getting a discount might be at hand?
Yeah.
There's a good high probability that, yeah, I've got cash right here today. I'll get, da 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 da. So the landing is that 4 years to give himself the chance to take back that banking function for that car. And then once he's there, everything starts to snowball. He's picking up a tailwind, and he's propelling faster and faster. And I guess I want to say that earlier in this, when I was saying that I felt like I was on the hamster wheel back in New Hampshire, I think of I was just running up against a headwind. Never
Hmm.
really thought of it like that. But I was running up against a headwind, and I was constantly in a struggle, like, to get this job done, get that job done, get this quote, sell that job. It was constant. Um, yeah, so that was a headwind for me.
And your jets are burning at full throttle, and you're not getting super far. You're kind of staying on the same, like above the land. You feel like you're driving, flying super fast, but you look
Yep.
down and you're not really going anywhere. And it's like, what the heck?
Right. Yeah. 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 That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's
So,
frustrating.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, okay, I'll ask the question again. Anything else?
Oh man, there's so much more. There's so much more. Nelson, he gave, like, when I was thinking about all this, I was like, man, we could talk for 2 hours about these 2 pages. It's so good, and because this is the problem. This is what he mentions, that the fish are the last to notice the water. He talked about that. I don't know if he put that in his book, but um, we don't notice when we're in that headwind. We're so
Mm,
blind to it. I was thinking about the
I
narrative.
was. I
Yeah,
was.
right, right. And I was blind to the fact that I was living in a very scarcity mindset. And anyways, I was thinking about the narrative, and I was just imagining somebody going into the bank and using this 10% to the savings and the 34.5% that's going towards interest as the example. I was just thinking, someone goes into the bank, and the banker says to him, well, why don't you just focus on growing your 10% and let us worry about that other 34.5% that's you're going out in interest? Consumer's like, that sounds great. Thanks for handling all that stressful stuff. He said, "Oh, we're here to help. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any other questions? Um, yeah, would it be better to put my 10% in a speculative, high risk investment, or just give it to you to manage?" Well, I'll be happy to take it for you. I can manage that. Sweet, thanks. I'm so glad I don't have to worry about this anymore. The banker says, "My pleasure. You want a dum dum on your way out?"
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Um,
It's just like that's how obscene the narrative is, but that's what we're all just like willingly walking into it because we don't see what's happening.
yeah. We don't really, well, we view it as, I think we view it as a struggle, to
Yeah.
figure it all out. And if somebody could relieve us of that, then we're more than happy to do it. I mean, even if they didn't know about the 34%, you tend to visualize that this is just something off my plate. This is why we hand our money over to qualified plans, because it seems as though it's very complicated to create wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah. Um,
What stood out to you the most in this whole section here, these 2 pages?
I think that the thing that's hmm, it's a good question. What's the most that stood out? I think to me it's the volume of interest that sticks out that I never I wouldn't normally have thought about. Um, that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, we we just don't see it. That's
Yeah, we
not how
don't.
things are calculated.
Yeah, we're just going about our daily life. We're just moving along the line with everyone else, and when we get together at the office or virtually, the conversation may come around that we're just talking about, my return on investment. What am I getting for a return? And 8, 10, 12% maybe, but never thinking about all the volume going out the back door. So you have a leaky bucket. You
Mm-hmm.
basically have a leaky bucket, and you don't even really think about it in those terms.
I have a question. If you had the option of getting 8% or yeah, 8% return on 10% of your income, or 6% return on 34.5% of your income, what would you prefer?
8%. 8% on 10. Is that what you said?
Yeah. If you're getting 8% on your savings, like obviously it's a higher or 10% on your savings. If you're going to get
Yeah.
10% on your savings, which is a small portion of your income, would you
Yeah.
take that over getting even 5%, let's say half the growth on 34.5%?
Oh, I'd take the half.
Yeah, right. Because it's a bigger volume, right? But
Yep.
when we think about everything generally speaking in those rates, well, I want a higher rate. I want 10%. 10% on what? On what? On how much of your wealth?
Yeah. Yeah. On a lesser amount.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
really that efficient? I don't know.
I don't know. It's not efficient. Yeah, and I guess I want to go back to that, the landing of the plane, to and the young man saving for 4 years and changing his environment through that. It's the time that it takes to do that, I think, that can be difficult to grapple with,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But you know, if God willing, we live long enough, we're going to go through those 4 years. We're going to go through the 10 or 20 or 50, whatever it is. We are going to go through those years. The sooner we start, uh, the better off we'll be. Uh, you know, so I'll bring up. I started my policy last year at 67, and somebody might say, Why would you even do that?" And the fact is that I still need a place to store the cash that will grow forever, uninterrupted compound interest. I've already taken a loan to pay off something that was going to have a fee attached to it. And so now I've eliminated that fee and I'm in control of the repayment program. And that was all within 1 year. And it was the same with my wife's policy we started 5 years ago. Shortly after we started it, we took a loan and put up a new fence around our house. And we were in control of that, and we paid it back, and then we've done a number of other things. And not to be using, because you know, way we ran our life back east, we were using credit cards, and we
Mm.
couldn't always pay them all off, and so we were getting dinged for that, you know. But now we don't have any credit card, debt. So it's and we use them for creating points, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, but that's about it. Um, yeah, I think that the volume of interest has been the most impactful personally to alleviate that. And then again, there again, when our mortgage is paid off here shortly, um, that will be gone as well. And so that money that we would normally be sending to the bank, that's going to go into our bank from that point on, forever, forever.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. So cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mention Nelson mentioned
Go-
that everything you do in the financial world is compared to what everyone else is doing. And going back to what you were saying about landing the plane, changing your environment, and then taking off again in a better environment, you can control that in the banking world. You can't control that everywhere else, but you can control it in the banking world. It might take you a little bit of time.
mm, yeah,
That's fine, right? We didn't get to where we are in a snap of a finger. It took us time to get to where we are. It's going to take us time to get to where we want to go, right? It's going to so
yeah,
don't
yeah.
don't get stuck in that something for nothing and immediate gratification mindset, because it's very very difficult to take back control over the banking mindset if or the banking function if that is your mindset.
Yeah, and I want to say too that the prosperity, the possibilities of things, thinking in that, having a mindset in that way, is extremely helpful with, because you can see it growing right out of the gate. You know, if you want to do that kind of thing, and certainly I had my very first client did that. He checked it every single day and could see that it was growing inside it. It wasn't, you know, large, but it was going in the direction. So he had turned his ship around. He was turning his ship around, and it has taken time. Um, yeah. So you got to be disciplined. It isn't, going to change your world overnight, but it will change it forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it will. Well, cool. Any final thoughts, Ray?
No. I look forward to um, our next talk. But no, I don't think I have anything else to say here. How about you?
Yeah, I would say if you want to create perpetual tailwinds for yourself, do it with infinite banking. It's the easiest way to do it, really, in the financial world. And you can. It's very achievable. You just have to know what you're doing, and it doesn't take very
Mm.
much. Spend a little bit of time, reach out to us, read a book, and you'll get it soon enough. It's weird,
Yep.
it's different, but it's very effective and very
Yeah.
efficient. So,
Yeah. And once you do know, you'll know what to do.
yep.
Yeah. All
Absolutely.
right.
Well, thanks again. Thank you guys for listening, tuning in. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We love all the support that we've been getting from you guys. Thank you, and have a good one. Until next
All
week.
right. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you for joining us on the Sound Banking Podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click on the notification bell. Otherwise, join us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for more content.